Cardinals Corner from Arizona Sports.
Cardinals Corner from Arizona Sports with Tyler Drake and Lauren Koval.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Cardinals Corner, and it's an exciting podcast not only because the person sitting to the right of me is not Tyler Drake, who's back on dad duty right now in San Diego. So Tyler, I hope you're enjoying a cocktail on the beach and taking care of your kids, as we all hope that you're doing well. And he missed an exciting week because we've got a Cardinals schedule finally. We've known the opponents for a few weeks now, but now we know in exactly what order they are. So with that being said, the person sitting next to me now, Damon Allred, you are the co-host of the State of the Sun Devils podcast, and you can also follow along with all of his work on ArizonaSports.com, especially as ASU season kicking into high gear, the football, the basketball, all the important things.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for having me. Always happy to be here. So, yeah.
All right. Well, with that, let's get on into it. So first, we'll start with a little bit of a win and loss record this year for the Cardinals. Where do we see them fitting in? So we'll go game by game. You give me, a little blurb on what you think is going to happen. Is it a win? Is it a loss?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's get into it.
All right, perfect. Well then, week 1. We kick off in the Big Easy. They're heading to New Orleans to face off against the Saints.
Yeah, the Superdome. And it's especially super for Mac Wilson, who we just spoke to yesterday. He's got, I think he said 4 or 5 games this year where he's going to have a lot of family coming in. Obviously, Kyler Murray is going to have some family at one of these games as well. We've talked at length about how Kyler Murray can succeed in Texas, but, even around Texas, plenty of opportunities for, the amount of football players that Texas produces. Obviously, a lot of Texas players on this Cardinals team, and so, they're getting a little bit of that family experience, and kind of in the same way here with the Saints team, some opposing quarterbacks with a little bit of familiarity with the team they'll be playing in potentially their first start or potentially their first season opener that they're starting in.
And that being said, I think the biggest question mark with the Saints is you're lucky that you faced them the first week of the season because who's their quarterback? They have a ton of questions heading into this season, the biggest one being, who's their starting quarterback? Is it Tyler Shuck, who they just drafted? Is it Spencer Rattler? Or is it a veteran we're not even thinking of? And with that in mind, for me, that week 1 is a victory for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I've got it as a victory as well. I think I would give, just in terms of if we're going to look at the Valley quarterbacks over on that other side, I think Spencer Rattler has that edge for now just because of the several games that he started last year. So I would expect maybe he gets the nod to start and maybe Shuck gets some playing time later in the season. But in any case, Cardinals victory there. I have it as well.
All right, there we go. They're starting the season with a victory, and then in week 2, they head home for their home opener this year against the Carolina Panthers. A little bit of a revenge game, if you want to call it that, after heading out to Carolina, someplace that the Cardinals notoriously have struggled over the past few years. They lost over there to Bryce Young and the Panthers. So what do you think happens this time around?
Yeah, the Cardinals were one of their 5 wins from last year. Not a great group to be a part of.
No.
But with Teteroa McMillan, obviously with the Panthers as well now, their top 10 pick in the draft. It'll be cool to see him come back to Arizona after he starred down in Tucson with the Wildcats. But I think this is another win for the Cardinals as well, just because of that revenge factor you mentioned. Mac Wilson yesterday talked about that as well. So that's 2-0 start for the Cardinals, win their away opener and their home opener for me.
And for me as well, I think that's a win for the Cardinals. I think that there's a little bit too much of that revenge factor on the line. I also think the Panthers, another team where they went back and forth on their quarterback last year and then eventually decided Bryce Young was the guy that they had to stick with. By the end of the season, it seemed like Young had really started to figure it out for the Panthers in that offense. That being said, that team overall has some big holes they did not fill this offseason. Therefore, I think the Cardinals should beat them.
Real quick, before we move on to the Niners as well, I think these first 2 games are going to be huge for the Cardinals just as far as setting the tone, obviously, given the first 2 games. But knowing that it's 2 inferior teams, at least on paper, I think if these are 2 wins that they can get under their belt, I think that just will say a lot about the mental makeup of the team and, whether they can be easily gotten by something like, oh, this is a win you should get on paper, and then they don't actually get it. I think if they do get these 2 wins, you kind of feel good about where the headspace is of the team as far as like how they're responding to really the mindset Gannon wants to instill in the team. And so I think that if they can get that 2-0 start, they're kind of going into this little divisional slate of the schedule, feeling pretty good about themselves. Maybe not too much. Obviously, you don't want to be feeling too good about yourself, but that 2-0 start against weaker teams, it's something you want to notch.
And to that point, I think this schedule, which I'll talk a little bit more about once we get through all of it, can kind of be divided into thirds for the Cardinals. In my mind, there's very specific things that I think break up this schedule that I'm going to be looking at their record specifically after each of these thirds. So we'll see what happens there. I'll dive into that in a little bit. But week 3, our first divisional matchup, and they're headed to the San Francisco 49ers, a place where recently they found a lot of success, and a Niners team that there's a lot of question marks surrounding because their offseason was kind of an ugly one. They lost a bunch of guys. They had a decent draft come around for them. And now it's, how much do we trust Kyle Shanahan? How much do we trust Brock Purdy? How healthy can Christian McCaffrey stay? Will he be on the field week 3 for the Niners?
And another thing to that is, how happy will Brock Purdy be? Obviously, the contract things that have been going on with him this offseason, and you mentioned the guys that they've lost. Deebo Samuel, there's no bigger one than that to me. Just the dynamism that he provided to that offense. I think that really so much of that offense's identity is in Deebo. And so I think it's going to be hard for them to kind of figure some things out, just as far as at the beginning of the season, at least, with how that offense is going to operate. But I think that that's really another opportunity where if the Cardinals are the team that they think they can be, that's a win that they should get. And so I'm going to give it to them here as well.
And I'm actually going to give them a loss here. Yes, they've performed well in San Francisco over the past few years. I still think that the coaching of the San Francisco 49ers and Shanahan and the way that they run their offense is built to score a lot of points. Before, that would have them blowing out certain teams and really finding success because their defense was so successful. They've lost a lot of those key faces that when you think about playing the San Francisco 49ers, they're gone now. That isn't really part of their team. That being said, they're still a really terrific, balanced, well-run, well-coached team. And I think that in the end, the Cardinals starting 2-0, there's something that's going to give. There's something where we're going to go, okay, they won those games and they looked really great, but maybe something we want to see better from them. Whether it's, the breakout of Trey Benson or how's the wide receiver core doing, something along those lines. I think that the 49ers will exploit that in week 3 against the Cardinals. And week 4, they're up against another division rival. It's a short week for them. They've got a Thursday night, one of their 2 primetime games, and that puts them against the Seahawks on Prime Video at home. What do you think about that one?
Not only a short week, but a short week coming off an away game. So you've got that travel in there as well. That is, to me, just really hard factors to overcome. There's a lot of turnover with the Seahawks. Obviously, Geno Smith is out. Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp are in. So I think that maybe some start of the season things have to be kind of
ironed out.
Ironed out. The Seahawks were a good team still last season, 10-7, didn't make the playoffs, but there were respectable things happening there. And just I think that the coaching there is a lot better than it had been in recent years with the end of the Pete Carroll regime and all that. But just with facing the short week and the travel aspect and all of those things coming together, I think that this is one, especially with how weird these Cardinals-Seahawks games can get, especially when they're on Thursday nights, this is one I'm going to chalk up to a loss.
And I'm completely there with you. I think this is another loss. I think they start their in-division play 0-2. I hope that's not true. But like you said, the Seahawks, kind of a weird team. They, too, have a young head coach. They've got a lot of moving pieces. But I think that those moving pieces could really start to figure themselves out around week 4.
Right.
That short week, yes, it's a short week for both of them. Yes, Who knows what's going to happen? Like you said, Seahawks, Cardinals love to do something crazy and love to be weird. I wouldn't be
Throwback
surprised.
to a 6-6 tie on a Thursday.
Yes, yes. Back on a Thursday again. I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see one of these teams just like run away with that game. I picked it as a loss for the Cardinals, but I wouldn't be surprised if this game at no point is close or it's one of those weird 6-6 matchups that everybody hates to see.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there. And then we're back to our regular schedule of Sunday afternoon games. And this time they are at home against the Tennessee Titans. What do you think happens there?
The lowly Tennessee Titans, given their 3-14 last year. Cam Ward coming in. I personally like Cam Ward a lot. You know, I think he's a guy that really impacts your team in a big way rather than just in the passing game like a lot of quarterbacks can. But it's a 3-14 team from last year that is going to be trying to work in Cam Ward. And, you know, at this point in the season with the Cardinals, I think I have them at 3-1 so far.
Yes.
I think that the Titans just wouldn't be able to stack up just as far as everything the Cardinals bring to the table as far as their physicality and all the scheming that Nick Rallis does. I think Nick Rallis can really have success against a rookie quarterback. And so that's one I'm going to give the Cardinals to.
And that was one of the things that Tyler and I talked about a lot last season was, hey, the Cardinals are facing off against a rookie quarterback. This should be a win. And a lot of the time it wasn't. A lot of the time they couldn't figure it out. It was a new face that necessarily didn't fit with how they'd schemed to beat that team. That being said, Cam Ward, I think he's great. I think he's very talented. I'm excited to see what he does in the NFL. But you're still going up against a 3-win team from last season who still has major gaps and major holes and things that they need to figure out on their own. And overall, I think less talent than the Arizona Cardinals have. And for that reason, I'm giving the Cardinals a win there against the Titans as well. And then we head to week 6. They hop back on the road for a Sunday morning game in Indy against the Colts.
Anthony Richardson? Daniel Jones?
Isn't that the $1 million question? I'm feeling Anthony Richardson.
I think I am too. Just because of that upside that he brings that really Daniel Jones just does not.
No.
And so I
Sorry,
think that,
Daniel Jones, but we all know.
And there was a good joke in the schedule releases this week about Anthony Richardson that we'll get to a little later. But I do think that, you know, that team, it still feels like it's becoming what it will be, and like it's nowhere close to what it will be. And, you know, the Cardinals are kind of 2 or 3 steps further along in that process than Indianapolis. And so I'm going with another win. And I think this puts me at 5-1, which
it does.
Is a very, very hot start. But I feel like just given the way the schedule shakes out, I think that that's kind of what presents itself in this situation.
And I'm going to give the Cardinals a loss on the road in
upset.
Indy. And yes, I think that being said, I think Anthony Richardson will be the quarterback of the Colts by week 6. Or they'll have a set guy. There's not going to be as many question marks of who's actually figuring it out for this team. I think that the Colts are dynamic in ways that the Cardinals don't see in their own division. The Colts run a very different kind of offense and defensive scheme than what the Cardinals are used to seeing. The NFC West is very, we will either pound you to the ground with our running style, or we're going to beat you through the air and make you defend us with your safeties and your corners. The Colts are not that kind of team. So I'm interested to see how the Cardinals will perform against a kind of team that they haven't seen in the Colts, also in a scheme they haven't really seen in the Colts. And that being said, I'm giving them the loss here. That, for me, brings them to 3-3 to start the season.
I think it makes sense just because of, like, you know, you kind of factor in some oddities and some things that you wouldn't expect.
I think
that will always happen.
To that point, I think that Colts game might be the game for me where I go, the Cardinals always have a game every year where they should win it and they don't win it.
Yeah.
And that might be that game for me. That Colts game is one the Cardinals should have, yet I don't think they will.
And then moving on to a game that I don't think either of us think that they should have.
No, and that is the Green Bay Packers at home. It's the return game from last year. They headed off to Lambeau, their worst loss of the season against the Green Bay Packers, and a Packers team that looks a lot the same and has only added some more dynamic guys through the draft. It always seems like the Packers tend to draft really well and fit that into their team pretty seamlessly. So we've got a Sunday afternoon game at home against the Packers. What do you think happens there?
Not only did they improve in the draft, but they improved in ways they had not done in decades.
Yes.
And that is by adding a wide receiver in the first round. Texas is Matthew Golden, who is someone I feel really strongly about, and at times...
PTSD. I can't believe you're bringing this up.
I mean, I feel no PTSD.
Good.
Things happen. Matthew Golden is a spectacular receiver who's made some spectacular plays. The one you're referring to, obviously, the 4th and 13 against ASU in the Peach Bowl that ended ASU's season. I really think that he just adds to their strengths as far as what Jordan Love can bring as a passer and how he can really stretch the field in ways that not a lot of quarterbacks can in the NFL. And I think Matthew Golden is poised to cash in on that. And so I think that that's one where maybe Matthew Golden makes some Valley fans hurt the way that they did earlier in the calendar. And so I'm chalking that one up to a probably big Cardinals loss.
And I'm chalking that up to a loss as well. I just think the Packers are a more sound, sort of professional team than the Cardinals. By that, I mean they know exactly where their weaknesses are. They go out and they target them immediately. They had the flexibility to draft a wide receiver, which they hadn't done in the first round in forever because they'd plugged and filled so many of these other gaps. It also feels like the Packers are a team that never seems to have a lot of turnover from season to season. They stick with a lot of the same guys. And Jordan Love, I've got my own questions about Jordan Love as a quarterback, whether or not I actually think he's going to be in that sort of top tier of quarterbacks. I think when he first started, we all thought, wow, he might be because he's got to sit behind Aaron Rodgers and really figure everything out. And then he got out on the field.
How beneficial can sitting behind Aaron Rodgers be?
Yeah. And by that, I mean, I think that only added to our expectations of what Jordan Love was going to be like as a quarterback and be as a playmaker out there on the field. And
because we had seen that succession plan work before with Brett Favre, too.
Exactly. And I think we're seeing it work. I don't know where the ceiling is for him yet because he goes to playoff games and looks absolutely atrocious. But during the regular season, sometimes makes the most incredible plays you've seen. And you go, what the heck? Where's that quarterback going to be all season long? So I'm intrigued for this season, generally speaking, for what the heck happens with Jordan Love. And we'll be able to keep an eye on that week 7. Week 8, a bye week.
Perfectly placed in the middle of the season.
A bye week for the Cardinals that we haven't seen happen this early in years, and truly a perfectly placed one. I love a week 8 bye. I think that's great for them. And that also, to me, breaks up that first third of the schedule. I think that first third, even though I have them going 3-3, that's where my apologies, I have them going 3-4 by the time that we get there. But I think that's where you're gonna look back at what I just picked for them and go, wow, Lauren, you were wrong. Like, if there's going to be any place where that happens, I think it's that first third of the schedule because that's their easiest third of the schedule.
Yeah,
right,
a losing record in the easiest part of the schedule seems to indicate you might not be very high on this team.
I'm high on this team, but they need to prove a few things to me before I can say this is a different Cardinals team.
What's the biggest thing?
Being able to win in the last third of the season.
How are they going to prove that in the first third?
Because I think that we all had unrealistic expectations now looking back last year going before they got to that bye week. This team's blowing us away.
Yeah, the 4-game win streak going into the bye.
Exactly. Like, look how incredible they're going to be. They've really figured it out. Could I see that happening again this year before the bye week? Yes, it's Seattle, it's Tennessee, it's Indy, it's Green Bay. I think that Green Bay game is definitely a loss. But I think you could look at that schedule and go, that's easy. That's a very winnable stretch for the Cardinals. And yet, if they don't do that, this back half of the schedule is the gauntlet for them.
Yeah, no question. And it starts in Dallas on a Monday night.
Another primetime game for the Arizona Cardinals. They have 2 this year. They had 1 last year. They're headed out to Dallas for Monday night, a place that Kyler Murray has never lost.
And certainly George Pickens will be stabilizing force for the Cowboys, right? Everything that's gone on over in that area of the NFL, certainly George Pickens is the answer, right?
I'm going to go with a strong no on that one. Yes. Kyler Murray, he always performs well. He's headed home. He's headed back to Texas. He's already commented there's going to be a bunch of family there. We knew that they were going to play the Cowboys at the Cowboys. Did we think it'd be a Monday night battle following the bye week? No. But I think that's really exciting. And it also gives the Cardinals the opportunity to really show what they're made of right out of the bye week and prove all of us wrong in what had happened last year. We're a different team. We've grown. We've added. We're more mature. We've got more of that violence headspace that Jonathan Gannon loves to talk about so much. And I think for that reason, that's a win.
Yeah, I think it's a win as well. Kyler Murray is obviously comfortable there, given the last 10 years plus that he's spent in that stadium.
He
really
won't have the light shining through
That's
that
a great
window.
point,
It's a
because
night
it's a
game.
night game. And so I think that the Cardinals will be able to exert their identity on Dallas in that way that you're referring to. And yeah, I mean, they're an explosive team when things go right, Dallas is. You know, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens are great talents. But they're also explosive in the wrong ways, too, with Mike McCarthy at head coach and Pickens now in that locker room and some of the other pieces in there as well. I think that this is one where if the Cardinals are able to keep Micah Parsons at bay, then they're on a good path to a win there.
Yes, and how much sort of turmoil will the Cowboys be facing at Week 9?
Right. I mean,
who knows?
Mike McCarthy might not be the head coach by then.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of question marks surrounding that team. People didn't think Mike McCarthy was going to be back this offseason, and Jerry Jones' comments were reaffirming for a bit, and then they fell off a cliff.
And then they weren't.
Yes. So then Week 10, they are headed back on the road again, this time to Seattle. By Week 10, they will have played Seattle twice, and we'll be done with playing them for the rest of the season. So what do you think happens in this one?
I think this one is a loss. I think that the 12th man is a tough thing to overcome, and especially coming off not super short, like in the case of a Thursday game, but a semi-short week. I think that that's going to be a little bit tough to overcome, especially when you have another divisional game coming up right after that you're maybe looking to a little bit. But yeah, just a little stretch of games here where, you know, these are big platforms to kind of show whether you are the team that is last year's team or whether you are a new Cardinals team that is competing well in the second halves of seasons.
Yeah, and I think that being
like your point.
Yeah, I think that being said about what will they do coming out of the bye week and what will we see from them, I actually have this Seahawks game on the road as a win. I think they're going to take that energy from being on the road at Dallas, winning a Monday night game, winning a primetime game, and then take that energy and channel it into a win at the Seahawks. I think this year they will go 1-1 against them. And I'm intrigued because I have them losing at home because it's a short week. It's a Thursday game. Those games are always weird and maybe not the best football put out there in prime time. I think they're then going to go on the road in their regular slot, a Sunday afternoon game, and beat the Seahawks. That stadium is insane. I have spent some time at that stadium. I've seen a game at that stadium. It's nuts. The 12th man is very much a real thing, but I think that this Cardinals team is going to channel their bye week in a different way and instead break out with 2 wins heading into Week 11, where they see another in-division foe. Also important to note, they're playing the San Francisco 49ers Week 11 at home. We've not yet seen the Rams, and we're already done with the Seahawks and the Niners.
That is crazy to just when you put it in that perspective. Because I know that there's a lot of times recently since the NFL did a scheduling overhaul within the last several years where a lot of the times, you know, there's a divisional foe where you'll play them twice in the last 4 or 5 weeks, as is the case again here with Arizona.
Yep.
And so that really takes a lot of the real estate of the schedule away from other divisional opponents. And so it makes sense to kind of see them broken up into these stretches. I would like to see it a little more evenly spaced, where you're playing the Rams once at the beginning and once at the end, and the Seahawks once in the middle and once at the end, maybe, and things like that. But, this is NFL scheduling, and so the 49ers game right here, I look at it as a win just because, the coming off a couple of big road games, getting back to home, I think feeling a little bit of that comfort after going through the bye week before that too. I think it's going to put the Cardinals in a space where they're able to kind of get back to that identity. And so I'm giving that one a win.
And I'm giving that one a win as well, because I think that the Cardinals are again going to split with the Niners, and I have them losing on the road in San Francisco. So now I think they're going to beat them at home, because I think they've seen them once. They figured them out. They know what this new look Niners team's like. I mean, there are still some fundamental pieces that every year we go, yep, George Kittle's over there, and yep, Brock Purdy's over there. And tons hasn't changed in their coaching room, so we know what to expect from this Niners team. But that being said, by week 11, I think the Cardinals have a pretty good idea of who they are, and I think us as fans will have a pretty good idea of what they're like too. And I think that is a win for the Arizona Cardinals. And now we head into week 12, where they're at home against the Jags.
I gotta say, I have just been hearing Liam Cohen's voice in my head all day. Just thinking about this one game.
I apologize.
Duval. No, I mean, people make fun of him for like the corniness or whatever online, but all the reporting on him is that he is someone that knows ball and will be able to communicate that effectively. We saw how bold the youngest GM in the NFL was on draft night, James Gladstone, at 34 years old, trading up from 5 to 2 to take Travis Hunter, who's going to help them on both sides. I think that is the makings of a very awesome regime down in Jacksonville, where they've maybe finally found the right pairing to find success at that franchise that has been lacking it for so long. But it's early in that process, and the Cardinals will be able to take advantage, I think. So I'm chalking that one up to a win.
And I'm chalking that up to a win as well, because like you said, it's a Jacksonville Jaguars team that, quite frankly, if you're an Arizona Cardinals fan and you're free on November 23rd, go see Travis Hunter.
Right.
Like, there's so many exciting young players that the Cardinals get to face off against this year, and I think he headlines that excitement. That being said, he's still a rookie in the NFL. Also, what's he playing? Is he on the field on both sides?
I think the plan is yes.
Yes.
A little bit of receiver and a lot of corner is what I was reading at first.
Yes.
Coming off the draft.
We'll see what happens there by week 12. I'm sure we'll have a clearer picture for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But like you said, too many questions. They're a young team. I think they're like the 2 or 3 years ago Cardinals.
Right.
They're starting to figure it out. They know what they need to do. They know that they're in that rebuild. It feels like they've been in a rebuild for a really long time, but now it actually feels like they're taking those steps to moving forward and building this young, talented roster. They just haven't gotten there yet.
Right.
And next up, they hop on the road for a morning game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Baker versus Kyler. Always fun.
A little OU matchup there.
Yeah. And, to me, the Bucs are just a more established team, a more we know who we are kind of team. And so that's why I'm giving this one to the Bucs. A little bit of a revenge game for the Bucs head coach, Todd Bowles.
Yep.
But just all those factors coming into play, I think the Cardinals lose that one. That feels like the Packers game a little bit to me.
Yeah, and I think that the Cardinals lose that one as well. I think they're going to be feeling hot about themselves, coming off of a lot of wins there at that part of the schedule, and then they're going to head to Tampa Bay. And I think the cross-country flight, there'd been for the longest time the idea that the Cardinals can't play on the East Coast, that has sort of died down now in the new way of the NFL scheduling, and also the fact that the Cardinals have won games on the road on the East Coast recently. I just think that this Tampa Bay game is going to be too much of a challenge for them, and they won't figure this one out. So I'm chalking that up to a loss as well. And then for the first time on December 7th, we get to see the Rams, and we get to see the Rams here in Arizona for their first divisional matchup, week 14. Of course, just as we all thought, we'd have to wait till the 14th week of the season to see them. What do you think about this one?
I think that the Cardinals are going to split these two Rams games, but I gotta say, Matthew Stafford will be 37 and a half by the time the season starts.
That half is very important.
It is a very important half. He's got to fall off at some point. He has continued to be a very respectable quarterback.
That's what everybody thought about Tom Brady.
I know. But Matthew Stafford has taken a lot more hits than Tom Brady. Yeah. He's taken the wrong kind of hits a lot more than Tom Brady. And so, it just feels like at some point the wheels are going to start coming off. They haven't really done that yet. Obviously, there's some arm strength that's fallen off, but he's still producing at a very high level and putting his team in a position to win. We know what Sean McVay is going to do to put his team in a position to win. They lost a lot of talent, or a lot of kind of depreciating talent that had been for a while. They add Devontae Adams. We'll have to see whether he can recapture some of the magic from when he was at his peak. I think the last year or two has definitely been rough for him. And so, maybe the Rams throw the Cardinals a nice little win for their hospitality. And we'll get to that as well again. But, I do think that they'll split these two Rams games. I'm not really sure about which one is which, though. I tend to think that they'll win the last one.
Okay, so we'll put this one down as a loss for the Cardinals. I'm also putting this one down as a loss for the Cardinals. I just think by the time you get to that point in the season, you're seeing the Rams. The Rams are always consistent. Yes, they lost Cooper Kupp, but they got Puka Nacua, and they'll figure out a way to beat you down. And I think that there are severe disadvantages to facing off against your first in-division rival by Week 14. You're going to see them again Week 18, so can you course correct by the time you get there? I like your point to them splitting with them just because you've seen them so much. You've seen them so frequently. I think this one is also a loss for the Cardinals. And then they head on the road to the Houston Texans.
Yeah, the Texans really are putting some receiver talent around their young quarterback. Picking up both Iowa State wide receivers, Nolan Higgins in the draft. Both were 1,000-yard receivers last year. I think that they can both come in and produce right away to a receiving core that already has a decent bit of talent. A guy like Tank Dell, for example. And so I think that the Texans will really be a good test for the Cardinals secondary, especially if the Cardinals are looking about pushing for the playoffs here in this last month of the season, where that would be a really good test for the secondary that is young in a lot of spots and is growing still in a lot of spots. So, it's a game that they could win based on if the secondary has made those strides earlier in the season. But I do think that this will be one that C.J. Stroud gets over Arizona.
And I also think it's one that C.J. Stroud gets over Arizona for those exact reasons. They lost Tank Dell late in that season, and instead they just went, let's add to that position. Let's grow. Let's continue to strive. Their defense was incredibly talented last year. It started to have a fall off towards the end of the season, but I don't believe that DeMeco Ryans will let that happen again this year.
That's a great point.
And that being said, the Texans, who sort of, I think, got out almost their freshman year flaws last year in a team that was supposed to be really talented and maybe didn't figure it all out, that this year they'll start to figure it out a little bit more. And then Week 16 at home against the Atlanta Falcons and Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah, he's ready as far as I'm concerned. I mean, goodness knows Kirk Cousins can only be the answer for so long.
Yes, the Minnesota Vikings learned that.
Yeah. And so I do think that this is going to be a win that the Cardinals get. I think it's going to be the second to last win that they get. No spoilers, but
okay, but
kind
spoilers.
Of a spoiler.
Yes. I think that this is a loss for the Arizona Cardinals.
Wow, the fighting Chick-fil-A's.
Yes, yes. As Jarrett and Luke have mocked now on our social media. But I think that this is a loss for them. And I think it's similar to that Colts loss that I have them having earlier in the year, where it's they should win this game, but I don't think they will. And I've had them losing both the Colts and the Falcons game. I think they'll split those games.
Yeah.
But I lean a little bit more towards a loss for both of those. Also just because of the toughness of this schedule. I think you could see the Cardinals really start to roller coaster again, really pile on some good solid wins, start to lose again in a little bit of some streakiness, if you will. And then we head to week 17 and 18, which are both flex games. They could be Saturday, they could be Sunday. The NFL does this so that then they can decide which games towards the end of the year do they think
most
are going to be good. And so now we have them visiting Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals.
Which are currently without Trey Hendrickson.
And it seems like they might be.
Yeah. He said that he's not going to play without a new contract. We know a lot of the times these holdouts do end up with new contracts. But for the time being, it seems like they might be more reliant on Shamar Stewart, which was an edge rusher that a lot of people had the Cardinals connected to. I think that that's still a tough team with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and all those guys. I think that that's a Cardinals loss.
I think that's a Cardinals loss as well. I just think the Bengals aren't going to let what happened to them last year happen to them again, and that we're only going to see this Bengals team get stronger and tougher and better. Also, Joe Burrow, one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL, for what it's worth. And I think by week 17, that team knows what they need to do, and they're going to go out there and do it. And then it's week 18 on the road against the Rams, who you've just seen 4 weeks earlier, but now you're going to see them again to close out the season. So, win for this one, for your spoiler alert there?
Yeah, win. I'm feeling a lot better about this than I was 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
Funny enough.
Good.
In terms of the losing the first one and winning the second one. Just because I do think that Gannon is underrated as a head coach in terms of these head coach to head coach matchups. And I do think that he's starting to get a kind of feel for how Sean McVay does things. And maybe by that point, he's able to get out a win.
And I think that by this point in the season, the Cardinals are going to have to figure it out. Who are they fighting at this point for the division? Are the Rams fighting for the division? Are the Niners fighting for the division? How good did the Seahawks look? I think there's a lot of question marks. I think that's going to be a really tough game for the Cardinals. But I think they're going to win that game because I don't think they want to end the season on a sour note. I don't think that Jonathan Gannon's going to allow them to end the season on a sour note again. Also, hopefully by week 18, the Cardinals are fighting for something. They're competing for something. They know they need to win that game. And against the Rams, that's the perfect opportunity to do it, to show that you're a different team.
There is nothing like meaningful football late in the season.
No.
There really isn't.
No, there's nothing like that whatsoever. So we're done. We've seen it all. How do you feel about the Cardinals' schedule as we've seen it as a whole now?
I got to say, as far as how the NFL does these things where, the third place team in the division will play other third place teams and how the Cardinals seem ready to make the leap, my head goes back to when you guys had Kelvin Beachum on earlier in the offseason, and he was talking about the brain trust positioning things toward this year being the year to make the leap to the playoffs. I do think that they'll be able to take advantage of that scheduling. Mac Wilson talked about yesterday that, you're never able to think of any game as a given, of course, in the NFL. But, a lot of these are games that they should win. And I think that they're on a trajectory to make that leap now, finally. And so I do think they're ready to kind of have a double-digit win season.
And that's where you have them. You have them. Yeah, you've stalled just long enough for me to do the mental math over here. So you have them at 10-7, which looking at that record, that's a playoff team.
I have to say, I thought I was going to come out higher, but maybe I was talked down in the last 24 hours.
You too are on a roller coaster season right now, just like the Cardinals could be. I have the Cardinals this year at 8-9. I think that's right around where they're going to sit. I think the first half of the season, like I said, I have it in thirds. So I think the first third, they're not even thirds, by the way, but this is how I break them up, week 1 through 7, until you get to the bye week. I think that is the winnable part of the schedule. Do I have them winning the early part? No. But I think that if you're going to change what everybody thinks about the Cardinals and sort of change the mindset of the Cardinals fan that goes and looks at all these people picking them to go to the playoffs or winning the West, and you go, yeah, well, we followed this team for years and they haven't been able to do that. We thought it'd be last year, but no, it's not. And I think all of that in mind, up until that bye week, is the point where you can change people's minds about this. I then think the next part of that schedule is week 9, right after the bye week, up until you play Jacksonville. I think those 4 games are really defining in the sense of, can you come out of the bye week and can you win? Because I think that stretch of games is the most winnable stretch after the bye week by absolute landslide.
Yeah.
So if you're going to start to add some wins to your total, they're right there. And then that Tampa Bay game, Sunday, November 30th. I think from then on, that last third of the schedule is incredibly challenging and is incredibly tough. And I don't know how many wins I actually see the Cardinals getting, so that if you want to make the playoffs and you want to have these statement wins, they have to happen before that Tampa Bay game.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Those last 6 games, all against teams that won between 8 and 10 games last year. No easy games in there at all. You know, a lot of those teams are probably even on better trajectories than they were last year.
And a lot of those tougher teams you're playing on the road.
Yeah, that's another good point. 2 back-to-back road games in that post-bye week part of the schedule, at least. Especially to finish off the year at Bengals, at Rams. So, you know, there are some things that set them up good in this schedule and some things that maybe set them up not so good. And really that's what you're looking for in every schedule, is just a nice set of balance.
Exactly. And I think that balance could have come by splitting some of those games up in the early part of the schedule, the week 1 through 7, and moving them all around. But you know what? We never get to pick that.
Right.
As fans, we never get to see that. I think when you first saw when the teams were announced months ago, I thought that they might have more than 8 wins. I have them at 8 and 9 right now, but the way that the schedule breaks down, I don't see them getting to those double-digit wins. I wouldn't be surprised. I think sort of the ceiling of this team is 11. I think that's where they can get to. And if they do, I feel really confident about the direction of this team. All right, now with all that schedule wrapped up, the schedule in the NFL, it's become a little bit different than when I think we both started watching the NFL. And instead, now it's become sort of a situation. So quickly...
A circus even.
A circus, if you will. So I think quickly we'll sort of wrap it up with some of our favorite schedule releases, the excitement of all of this, and of course... the Arizona Cardinals schedule, because you got to speak to Mac Wilson on Wednesday about... yesterday, about the excitement of this schedule drop. So what did you learn from him?
Yeah, it's crazy. We've mentioned Mac Wilson's name several times already on this podcast, and without bringing up Rocket Ship's name.
Yes, yes, his alter ego, if you will.
So he released a rap song called 18 Bars that was kind of showing the schedule, and it had an accompanying music video with, you know, plenty of players, Marvin Harrison, Kyler Murray, Michael Wilson, all in the film room. And he said that this shoot took like 13, 14 hours. He recorded it out in Mesa, which is really cool to hear. You know, released a couple more songs in the weekend too to make like a full EP out of it. He said that there's going to be more coming after OTAs wrap up. Then he's got to lock in to get some wins.
Yes.
Which I'm sure everyone wants to hear. So Mac Wilson was great to talk to about all that. It's clear to see that he's going to be one of the faces of this defense, especially with the loss of Kaiser White. You know, we've actually got a story about his leadership up on ArizonaSports.com, presented by Y-Refi, if you guys want to check that out. And, you know, I think it really made Arizona's schedule release the best out of the NFL as far as, you know, creativity and headline grabbing. You know, obviously there's not a lot of NFL players out here rapping their schedules.
No, there are none.
And he was pretty good.
Yes, the song overall is good. I think it's enjoyable. The whole vibe of that is really the camaraderie from the team that we've wanted to see from them forever. A few other schedule releases that I'll quickly shout out. Just like you said earlier, the Chargers schedule, where they have
Anthony Richardson.
Theirs is Minecraft themed. They have Anthony Richardson running out of gas on the field and then
Indy
leaving.
500 thing.
Yes, and then leaving that. The Colts got in trouble because they did one is Tyreek Hill as a dolphin. It was labeled Hill, and he got pulled over by the cops in the water. And
apparently Tyreek said that it was funny.
He said it was funny.
Yeah.
He said it was enjoyable. They edited it, and then it came back up. They dropped it about an hour after it originally came out. They edited it, so you can still go find it, though, on X.
Yeah.
Another team that I want to shout out is the Rams.
And the Niners.
Yeah. They both did it. I'm going to shout out the Rams because Brenda Song did it. And
Brenda Song, great comedic delivery in that schedule release.
Phenomenal. Also, I love her. That's my childhood. She signifies everything. And she's a female ball knower. So we love it. But she and the 49ers both shouted out the Cardinals for their hospitality in hosting the Rams last year, and they ended up not making a schedule release joke about them. She's funny about it, going, no, we really can't make a joke. No, we're being sincere. Thank you to the Arizona Cardinals for hosting them. So it's nice to see some in-division rivals shout out the Cardinals for their hospitality last year.
And nice to see some sincerity in a world where,
Yes.
jokes are the thing to be doing all the time. It's nice to see some sincerity. I have to do some negative shout-outs because I think there are some boring ones.
Okay, yes.
The Eagles and their 2001 Space
Yeah.
Odyssey of the Lombardi Trophy.
Yes.
Just to show the schedule in the last frame. Like, get out of here with that.
Yes.
It's 2025. And then the Buffalo Bills called on AI at the recommendation of Josh Allen. But in this case, AI was Allen Iverson.
Yep.
And I love Allen Iverson. I love everything that he brought to the NBA back when he played and everything, of course. But again, it's 2025. Allen Iverson just doesn't carry the same juice anymore.
Okay.
And he certainly didn't carry the same juice in the schedule release video where, even at the end of it, Billy Bean, the Bills GM, is trying to get Iverson to say go Bills, and Allen isn't even having it. And so for all those reasons, those left something to be desired. But, largely great success from the NFL schedule releases.
I like that we had a little bit of a drag session right there. I enjoyed that. And finally, I have to shout out the team that I think does the best schedule release every single
the
year,
Titans?
which is the Titans.
Schedule Rizzy?
Yeah, we all know what they're trying to do. It's all the drug commercials that we constantly see on our television, and instead now they're spoofing it into their schedule release. So shout out to the Tennessee Titans, who the Cardinals will face against in week 5 of the schedule at home.
Look at you, bringing it back together.
Thank you. That was me trying to wrap it up
It was
there.
a
How
pro
to
segue.
do? Thank you. Well, Damon, I got to thank you for joining us on this episode of
course.
Cardinals Corner. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you very much. I love being here.
Well, I'm glad. And with that, guys, that is this episode of Cardinals Corner, breaking down the schedule release. You can follow us at AZ Cards Corner on X. You can follow me at Koval_Lauren. And Damon, where can our listeners find you?
At I am Damon Allred.
Yes,
Because
you
I
are.
am.
Yes, you are. You can also follow along at ArizonaSports.com for all of our written content coming out about the Arizona Cardinals schedule. And you can see Damon writing about the Cardinals now, along with all things ASU. So once again, thank you, Damon, for joining us. And be sure to tune in next week, where we'll break down a little bit of those in-division matchups and where do we see that falling for the Arizona Cardinals. Thanks, guys.